Okay, we are going to call to order the Architectural Board of Review meeting for September 9th of 2019. If we could do a roll call.
Thank you. Chair Moore,
Here.
Vice Chair Witosh,
Here.
Board Member Olson,
Here.
Board Member Cunningham,
Here.
Board Member Six,
Here.
Board Member Watkins, and Board Member Inswa is absent.
Okay. With that, we will move into general business and open for public comment.
Mr. Chair, we do have a written correspondence or two written correspondences for general public comment.
Okay.
One is from Maria Zate, and one from Anna Marie Gott. They are in reference to training, the request for more training for the board, opposition to the mural project in the Funk Zone, concerns about public access to plans here at the office, and that's it.
Okay. And I believe those are all distributed to the board members.
They are, yes. You all have them for your consideration.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
One moment before we do that, we're going to continue through. Would anybody in the public like to address the board? Seeing no one, we will close public comment. And Mr. Cunningham.
Simple. With regard to public access to drawings, to plans, may we ask staff to tell us how soon it's going to be possible for people to see drawings online?
Can I ask?
Chair Moore, Board Member Cunningham, we are meeting on that internally, so I can't give you an answer right now, but in the future, and maybe even on Friday, I might be able to answer that question for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to approval of minutes. Start with August 12th. Does anybody have any edits or corrections?
Move we accept as presented.
Okay, we have a first. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any discussion? No discussion? Okay, first and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Oh, there you are.
One
You
abstention.
just said you weren't coming.
Okay, and now the consent minutes for the 19th.
For the Architectural Board of Review consent agenda for August 19th, 2019. Item A, 1096 Coast Village Road was continued indefinitely with comments. Item B, 234 South Voluntario Street was granted project design and final approval with conditions. Item C, 2700 De La Vina Street was given project design and final approval with conditions.
Move we accept as read.
Second.
First and a second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
For the August 26th consent agenda for the Architectural Board of Review, item A, 119 Harbor Way was continued indefinitely with comments. Item B, 817 De La Vina Street was given project design and final approval as submitted. Item C, 622 Olive Street was continued indefinitely with comment.
Okay,
Move we accept as presented.
okay, the first, we have a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next.
For the Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019 consent agenda for the Architectural Board of Review, item A, 1516 Clifton Street was continued indefinitely with comments. Item B, 813 West Mission Street was given project design and final approval with comments. Item C, 400 block of Old Coast Highway was continued indefinitely to full board with comments.
Okay,
Move we accept as presented.
Second.
First and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
For the September 9th, 2019 Architectural Board of Review consent agenda, item A, 3925 State Street, was granted project design and final approval with conditions. And item B, 1502 Chapala Street, was continued 1 week with comment.
Move we accept as read.
Second?
Okay, we have first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, I believe that's all of the meeting minutes. Any announcements, requests by applicants, etc.?
Yes. Board Member Cunningham will be conflicted out of item 1, 604 East Ortega Street. Items 3 and items 5 on the agenda were postponed. Item 3 will be renoticed for the September 23rd hearing, and item 5, 16 West Mission Street, will also be continued to the September 23rd hearing.
Okay.
Oh, and we also received a letter of resignation from Board Member Witosh. It does not provide a timeline, but that is, we have received it. It will be sent to the City Clerk's office, and further details to come. This may be Board Member Witosh's final meeting. It remains to be seen. It's on his timeline.
Okay. Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Remains to be seen, I think, is the operating word.
Correct.
Okay. Any subcommittee reports?
No news.
No news. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Well, let's move on to item number 1 then. 604 East Ortega Street.
I'll be stepping down due to conflict contract with the city of Santa Barbara.
Seat back.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. No. But she said you weren't coming, so I thought, well, I'll just move on it.
Okay, so
Apparently so.
this is a proposal for renovations for Ortega Park, and includes a new playing field, expanded pool, water slide, basketball court, skate park, bocce ball courts, cornhole courts, splash pads, shade structures, and 2 play structures. Also proposed are head-in parking spaces, reconfigured walkways, new pedestrian lighting, and new fencing and gates. This project will require Planning Commission review, and no final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. Project requires compliance with the project compatibility analysis and the urban design guidelines, outdoor lighting design guidelines, and was last here for a pre-application consultation October 22nd of last year. So welcome back. If you could introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. I'm George Thompson. I'm the Parks Capital Project Supervisor for the city.
I'm Jeff Ferber from RRM Design Group.
Elijah Pierce from RRM Design Group.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just say a couple words of intro. Since we came before the ABR in October, I believe it was, we went to City Council and presented the process to develop the plan, which was a series of community workshops, online surveys, and the concept planning process. And the City Council directed us to move forward with that master plan, and that's why we're here today, because we've done quite a bit of work since January. I'll turn it over to Jeff, and he can give a little bit more background on what's happened and also look at some of the feedback that we received from the community that has generated the actual design.
Okay. Well, you can see we got a lot of information in the package. I'm going to try to summarize, and then I'm sure during the question and answers we can get into some more detail. In general, I'd like to emphasize that the plan really reflects both comments from your group, from the Parks Commission on a couple different occasions in the City Council, but probably mostly came from a number of community meetings, including a follow-up community meeting that we did with users of your existing skate park and people that were advocating for the skate features within the park. City staff also did some follow-up neighborhood meetings with groups of folks that live in the neighborhood to get additional feedback following the community meetings. So all of the features that are in the plan kind of went through a process of both kind of the visualization so that people could see the kinds of things that might be included. It was done through a series of sample photos, and we were trying to tie everything back to the overall goals and objectives the community established for the park, which was driven largely by this kind of multi-generational and intergenerational feel that they wanted the park to have, based on the fact that they don't feel the park is currently very usable, safe, and accommodated towards families, based on the social issues that you're all very aware of. So the design you saw last time was based on those community meetings. After we received your input and more input from the Parks and Rec Commission, we went back in and did some refinement. So I think what I'll do is touch maybe on using the plan. And just kind of go around the horn, if you will, and explain some of the refinements around the perimeter. And we do have our civil engineer, Mike Hamilton, here if there's follow-up questions on the details of the street. But we have both head-in parking over on Salsa Puertas, 90 degree, and then we have back-in angled parking. Is it still back-in, George? All this was done in consultation with the Transportation and Traffic Division at the city. So we actually have the plans pretty far along, construction documents in those areas. We have added street trees, and there are also some kind of low-impact development areas for picking up the drainage.
So I'm having trouble orienting myself. I don't see street names here. Can you help me with that?
Sure. Over here is...
Okay, here.
Okay, so I think probably the best reference point is the junior high, Santa Barbara Junior High,
Okay.
just to the top of the sheet. This is Coda Street,
Okay.
Salsa Puertas, and then Ortega Street. And then Quarantina goes down here and transitions into a multi-purpose path currently.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
And I think I'll start at the top and at the athletic field. As you know, there's a sidewalk and a bike path, which will remain up near the junior high. The trees, the large trees that are sort of in bad shape under the power lines, will be removed, and there will be new trees added into the landscape. In general, there are more shade trees based on comments from the ABR. The utilities are not being undergrounded, I don't believe, George.
Not on Quarantina, no.
Not in Quarantina. The field is pretty similar to what you saw last time. The difference is it's shifted a little bit to allow more space over here for spectators, and then the baseball field, part of the surface was flipped over to the other side. That was just done by further analysis in terms of safety and playability. We have a number of entries into the park off of Coda Street, at the corner of Coda and Salsa Puertas, off of Salsa Puertas in the middle, and then over off of Ortega, as well as one through the entry to the pool area. A couple of the adjustments that we've made since we saw you last is in the court area. We downsized the court to a junior high size court. We added decomposed granite to have more permeability. We've added more shade trees, and we've reduced the amount of concrete and added some additional seating. This is one of the areas that was really critical to making the park activated and intergenerational. So if you can imagine teens, kids, seniors, people of all different ages in this area of the park, as well as, of course, the swimming area and the athletic field. But we think that that's one of the critical areas. So we don't have fewer amenities from the last time we saw you, but we did play around with it. We added some more grass in there, and we reduced the amount of concrete. The skate park area, previously when you saw it, was kind of a concept. Since our last meeting, we held a workshop down at the beach next to the skate park. We had a really good turnout, had about a 3-hour session with adults and kids and teenagers, really active members in the skate community. And we had Zach Wormhout, our expert skate designer who designs parks all over the country. And then this new plan is the actual skate park design based on that workshop. Subsequent to this, there's going to be a survey online where additional feedback is going to be solicited from the community, specifically about the skate park. At the two entries in between the courts and the skate park, as well as between the skate park and the pool, we removed some of the palm trees and added canopy trees. We also reduced the amount of concrete. The walks are still generous and large, kind of promenade, but we made them a little smaller to add more green space. And then we shifted the picnic kind of plaza area where the shade structure is right at the beginning of the soccer field, closer to the soccer field, changed the trees out along the grass to shade trees. And we only have the palm trees where we have as kind of accents, kind of that classic Santa Barbara look, but the practicality of the shade trees everywhere else. When the skate park got bigger, the playground got smaller. We're really kind of calling it a play area. There's going to be so much to do in the park that this is really kind of a play feature area that's associated with the picnic, the splash pad, which is now its own kind of space. And it's a place for the little ones to go and hang out and have some fun, but it's not designed to be necessarily a destination playground. And then largely the pool area is quite similar. It's a little more specific now. Instead of one kind of connected body of water, the city decided to go with 3 separate bodies of water or apparatus. This is more of a design deck layout, where stairs go, where the pool goes, how it works with the buildings, which Elijah will cover shortly. And so we looked at kind of visually how it looks for the neighborhood. We looked at the experience of the pool deck. There's a couple shade structures added between the mechanical building and the Welcome House building. And then you can see some kind of furniture areas. So this will be a place where families, seniors, people of all generations can kind of hang out and spend several hours, as well as being a very functional aquatic center. All right, George, let me know when I'm leaving out. Covered the shade trees, covered the court areas. The fencing was a comment that you all addressed. The fencing is around the perimeter, and it's probably would be similar to what you approved. George, what's the name of the park?
At Cabrillo Ballpark, which actually was approved by HLC, but it's a simple wrought iron, ornamental iron design.
Probably around 6 feet tall, so that it functions the way the city is looking for in terms of security. We looked at trying to set some of the entries back at the corner of Salsa Puertos and Coda. We increased some of the green area over there. And they're in there, I think in one of our sketches, we have, that next page there. That's the entrance off of Salsa Puerta. You can see a concept for the columns and the fencing, whether it's black or tan, whatever color it might end up being, and how it ties into the architecture. And then maybe a couple comments overall about the planting. In addition to being, meeting the qualifications for drought tolerance, it's envisioned to be bold, planting very picturesque as well as a functional landscape.
And just for reference, this is the mid-block entry. There's a little keyed diagram down at the bottom of the sheet to reference where that rendering is from.
There are crosswalks at the corners. The streets address the corner improvements that the city's been looking to do. So it addresses all the ADA issues, both in the parking and the pedestrian experience. And maybe at this point, let me make sure. There's another view here of, this is internal to the park, walking along that promenade that's between the soccer field and the kind of the play area and the picnic area. There's areas for public art. We don't show color on the canopy because we're still figuring out sort of the durability as well as adding color. The feedback the neighborhood gave to George and Rich was that they wanted to see the culture of the neighborhood reflected in the park. So there's a number of areas where we envision murals and public art being incorporated. So we show locations for that, but sort of reserve what that might look like for future study with the community as well as with the city. There are a couple of internal fences, just to quickly check back with fencing. The city envisions programming the athletic field so that they do it from a reservation system. So there's a lower fence internal to that along the promenade as compared to the taller fence. So along this area here, and then a large opening here so people can come and go at their leisure. There are a couple of sort of service and emergency exits from the field as well, which is important in an enclosed field. Maybe I should turn it over to Elijah for discussion of the buildings.
So there are 3 buildings that are on site. We'll walk you through. So I think we'll begin with what's referred to as the Welcome House. It is.
Here, Elijah, why don't we switch?
Yeah, the one over here.
And actually, before we move to that, Elijah will be discussing primarily the buildings located around the pool facility. So the Welcome House, there is a pump house, a small trash enclosure, and then the restroom changing room wing, which serves both the pool and the park.
So the Welcome House is an existing building, but we are looking to renovate it both for function as serving as kind of the gateway entry into the pool deck area, but also bring it up to the style and aesthetic of the rest of the buildings on site, which will be in a Spanish colonial revival. So let me flip here. So we're proposing on structurally renovating the roof, which is now a shingle roof, into a 2-piece mission tile roof, and adding some accent pieces, extended corbels, and a raking rafter. Adding a few details to the punch-out openings, headers at the windows, and giving it a little bit of a stronger base. Also proposing some Sistio tile at the entrance. Thank you. Just really trying to make this is the main entrance at the corner. Really making this read a little bit more like an entrance. Right now it's kind of has a low slung roof, so we're trying to open it up a bit. These are the secondary facades. Very similar, bringing in some Spanish detailing, but keeping in general the same similar massing as the existing building. Then we have the pool equipment building. This is a fairly utilitarian building, but we did believe that it could serve as a great canvas for potential future murals. Right now the park has a number of great murals, and we'd like to kind of continue that tradition on with this renovation. So let's see. we've opened it up. We've kind of framed out areas along the facades that we see as potential kind of canvases for community murals. This is the street side facade. It does need fairly large doors to be able to service bring in the supplies and equipment to the pool facility, but we see these as being decorative doors that don't look like flush flat metal doors. You can do clavos and decorative wrought iron hinges, things of that nature. So as it is utilitarian, we still want to make it look like a handsome civic building. All right. Then the third building is the restroom and changing room wing. So it is oriented to two sides, this being the pool deck side and this being the park side. So both a men and women's restroom wing on the general park side, also men and women's restroom on the pool side with some unisex changing rooms and showers. And then just individual stall changing rooms with a trellised covered outdoor shower area. So previously we'd had a larger tower in the kind of junction. We brought that down. We think it still succeeds as a handsome looking building, but without we didn't feel as though the tower's necessary at that entrance. So right here we have the restroom elevation at the pool deck. Have an entrance to break off into the two men and women's restrooms, a drinking fountain area, and then these doors lead to the unisex shower rooms, and then so this is an actually entrance into the mechanical area of that building. So very similar facade on the park side. Again, entrance to the restrooms, and then also a drinking fountain area. So this is looking at that joint between the restroom building and the changing room area. We do want it to be covered for stormwater reasons, as we'll have open drains there at the showers. But we really tried to simplify this down so it's a very shallow, nearly flat roof on a wooden trellis element. So it gives these some room to breathe in between the two larger elements. And then a tiled area with some decorative grills in between the showers. The showers are actually tucked behind those columns. And this is what you would see on the back side. Again, along this facade, we see this as a great opportunity to frame out some potential future murals. Okay. In terms of materials, we are proposing clay tile for the roof, some decorative barrel tile elements, and then stucco for the main body. There will be a few wooden elements, both this building and the wing of the changing room will have rafter tails. So you'll have some exposed wood, and then brings in some decorative light fixtures as well. A few locations. All right. We have this. And then, last but not least, we have just a little trash enclosure, keeping in the same language as the other three buildings, with a wooden trellis on top and a fairly simple solid masonry base. All right. Those are the buildings.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
That's it.
Okay, we do have some public comment, so if I could ask you three to take a seat in the audience. first.
Mr. Chair, just a quick reminder to the public and the board. The public comment format has changed. Public comment is asked to be made at the podium. If the chair or board members request that you approach the plans to point to specific parts of whatever you're commenting on, you can do so, but unless you're asked to, you will be at the podium.
Okay, thank you for the reminder. Mr. Gallegos? Jose? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon, board members. For the first time, since I've been coming here, so some of you recognize me, I approve this project. I think it's a good thing. There's only two things that I really oppose about this project. Is the, I guess it's the angle parking on the Ortega side, I believe. Due to the fact that right across the street you have residential residents living over there, and many of those residents, if they have family, friends, or whoever may come over to visit, they're not going to be able to park on that side of the street. My other concern is the fencing. Grant you, we've had some, homeless issues for many years there at Ortega Park, and maybe about 3 months ago or so, the police did a big major sweep there. And some of the individuals had warrants for their arrest. It was maybe about 3-4 individuals. Apparently, there hasn't been too much of a problem lately, except a few weeks back of stabbing. But that fencing, I'm not too thrilled with that because it's just going to prevent from people who want to go there in the evenings. Now, I know there's an ordinance at a certain time, not supposed to be at any of the parks. But if you're going to do fencing in that park, might as well do fencing at all the other parks within the city, but which is not going to be looking not very nice, especially Rocky Nook. And a lot of homeless people camp up in that area. But overall, I do like this project. I really do. Just minus the angle parking and the fencing. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Anna Marie Gott. She here?
She had to leave.
Oh, okay. She didn't indicate whether she was in support or opposition to. And we had a number of emailed comments as well. One from Mr. Rosenwald, who is concerned about light pollution on the ball field, as well as any streetlights that are installed. Concerns about the directions that they face and the pattern of illumination as his property is within 200 feet of the park. Then a request to speak from Aaron Goldschmidt. All right. You have 2 minutes.
Go. The light issue is one that I was going to bring up. It's within the design, whether it's the light features, the lamps themselves, which I would presume are a contributing element to the whole theme, weren't addressed, and neither was the lighting for the field. And that is something that I think at least the neighbors, the school, et cetera, would be interested in. Safety with the back-end parking on Ortega, I can't tell whether there's sidewalks there or not on the park side, but given that people coming and going are going to be focused on the street and not on the school, and perhaps particularly during the school rush hours in the afternoon, I think that's an issue that should be addressed. Something that isn't clear to me whether the park locks at night and how that's managed and how that's maintained. I know that the city is working on the hours of parks being open, and then. Let's see, with the trees, it wasn't identified. I'm sure this is coming later down the line with the shade trees on the Quarantina extension. On the graphic up there, it looks like the trees that are there, that's probably just a shadowing from what's currently there, but those are stone pine, Italian stone pines that are kind of a continuation of the street trees on Quarantina. So I'm just curious if that is something that will be considered as, again, the thematic tying in with the neighborhood, because that is a significant block of Italian stone pines. And then finally, it's a great design in support of it, et cetera. This particular iteration is not on the website. So if you were coming to be prepared for this, it's still a generation ago where it was a single water pond or water body, and the ball field was on the opposite side. So it might be good for the community to have the most current version available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak about this project? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and ask the applicant to return. And go to questions from the board. David, do you want to start?
I think one of the questions I had from the last meeting was along, I'm going to call it the south end of the field here. I assume that portion of the field will have a fence around it that's separate from the fence of the play area. Was there any further consideration of how to engage that kind of line, the distinction between the two right now? Because I think if people are, or maybe you can walk me through, if people are here and they want to watch a game, I imagine they have to come through at some secure locations into the field itself, but they probably couldn't watch it from the backside. Is that, or do you mind, I guess, the first point?
Sure.
Do you mind pointing out?
I'll just point that out. Yeah, there's the fence, the taller fence is around the perimeter, and then once you get past the backstop, it's a lower fence. There's a large opening with sliding gates that would be, so it's like 40-foot opening,
Okay.
Really large opening. So it sort of says welcome. Lower fence that would, some of the soccer balls would stop, and easy to come in, and there's more room now on this side than there was before, and people would just take a seat here or go around to the other side. And then the baseball, the reason we moved the baseball field to that side is we just did some analysis about where the baseball was likely to go, and this was better suited. The more balls end up out here. And did that answer your question about that? Okay.
And then if you can keep on that fence line between the play area and the soccer, there's a red pointer is right now. That fence line looks like it jogs a little bit back in towards the soccer field, and there's a little step off between that long walkway.
Yes.
Is there any kind of planning that's going to happen in that little finger between the walkway and the jog and the fence line?
Yeah. Well, there's planting all along both sides between the fence and the promenade. The reason it jogs is we were just trying to increase the amount of planting area. Here we couldn't do it because we needed room to get behind the backstop. Okay. So we didn't have as much room. But the idea is that the synthetic turf would go right up to the promenade, so you step right off to it.
Okay. And then if you could maybe answer that question from the gentleman who spoke in the audience, with lighting around the soccer field, how's that proposed right now? Or is there any consideration of it?
There is lighting, night field lighting. So today, their design is cutoff fixtures, so the light's very well controlled. It's not that you can't see it when you look over to the field, but the glare doesn't go outside of the light fixtures. George can address the hours that they might be on.
I guess that'd be the follow-up is, do they turn off when the soccer game's over, or do they run to a certain time?
The fields will really just be lit under permit only. So unless a group applies for a permit to use that field at night, the lights would not be on. We will have security egress lighting for the walkways, but again, the sports field lighting will only be under permit.
Okay.
And then we'll have a set time beyond which a permit would not be issued. We haven't determined yet what that time is.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, guys. No further questions.
Richard?
So this has been before the Planning Commission for a cursory review?
This has not been before the Planning Commission yet. We're actually going to the Park and Rec Commission at the end of this month, and then we will eventually get to Planning Commission.
So the question on how many and how often the night permits and so forth haven't been, it's really not an aesthetic question, but I would be concerned if I was a neighbor. How often? Do you have any idea of how often it would be at
At this time, we don't,
Yeah,
but
okay.
that'll certainly be discussed.
All right. Well, I'm still, I thank you for the scaled figures out there in the big field, but I'm still concerned about enough spectator room. You know, is there discussion of bleachers? And if not, I could see this, a piece, after the thought bleachers, at least on each side of the ball field. Is there, I'm concerned about the tightness through here and through here. Has that been examined and rationalized?
So I think it's relevant to bring up Dwight Murphy Field, which is another project that we're actually working on. That is really our destination soccer facility. This is more of a neighborhood youth sports type facility, so we're not anticipating this being a destination where we host tournaments and so forth. It's really in the model of a lot of the youth sports that use the park currently. You bring your own seat, and actually we wouldn't really host as many games on the larger field for our 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. It'll be run in smaller fields, basically this way. And if you look very closely, you can actually see the dashed outline of those smaller fields on the sheet.
So you're intentionally limiting the spectator areas.
We're trying to maximize the playing space, given that most people nowadays bring their own seats. If you look at some of the models out towards Goleta, where they have 600 kids show up for a weekend, everybody brings their own chairs, and they have flexibility to map out fields as
even
you see fit.
Even bringing their own chairs, it would seem that why was this line fence chosen as opposed to warping it out somehow to have or bending the boardwalk to have some more potential for sitting, and even though it's a bringing your own chair, BOC.
Sure. Let me just address the first issue of that fence line is depicted such that we actually preserve a lot of the existing trees and create some open, non-program turf space, natural turf space along the street frontage. It also softens that transition from the street sidewalk to the artificial turf field area.
So where that line is now is protecting trees. And
correct, existing trees.
Bending a portion of it is difficult due to the tree line.
We certainly could study that, but when we looked at the need for bleacher-type seating, we just don't see that big need for the type of sports that we're hoping to host here. Having a bleacher fixed in place really defines where they're going to sit and what they're going to see, rather than having people bring their own chair and sit next to their kids' game rather than out by the street.
Well, even bring your own chair seems to me to need more. But I'm getting into conversation. The skate park is fenced in, correct?
Yes, there's a low fence just to sort of control the skateboards themselves. And
so my first reaction was, these activities here, well, I guess it's okay. My concern is this part of the skate park right here?
yes.
So you're coming from this southwest corner, and then you're stopped here and have to go an awkward way around to get to the center punch. I don't understand why this is hooking out there and disrupting what would be a lovely axial continuation to the center punch.
A couple thoughts on that. One is it's somewhat programmatic in that during the outreach with the skateboarders and looking at the types of skating features and the transition flow, the way the skate park was flowing, that sort of created an opportunity over there for an area that there could be classes as well, where you could have smaller kids. It's a little bit more out of the way. Previously, it did the same thing, but it ended at the playground, and it sort of came to that point. I see your point, and we did look at that you have to walk around. That was the same with the previous design. So one of the things that came out of the skate workshop was this idea for sculpture of public art, and one of the participants had this kind of O for Ortega. So that this feature here is actually a skatable element that's public art. So as you come up that, you look through it and you can see a piece of public art there. But it's an O. It's maybe like steel or concrete, and on either side of it, the skate designers designed it so it has a skatable edge to it. So it's kind of a fun feature. It doesn't change the fact that you do. If you want to go around, you have to go around.
Visually see the punch.
Would you point to that again, where that art feature is?
It's there's two. There's a piece of public art at the terminus of coming up the walkway through the picnic area here, and
24.
then in the skate park, correct, there is a feature there, which is a big feature that you look through, and it's incorporated into the skating elements. And that was an idea that came out of one of the participants, which we thought it was nice to incorporate that specific idea.
Okay. So is there any other additional openings to the soccer field around the perimeters except for the grand one in the middle?
That's
40 feet?
the intention there is to have people come in and out of here during kind of the daily play. There is a possibility we have a sidewalk connection here. This would be like a gate with a panic gate so that you could exit here. Previously we had a connection right here. But our sidewalk connection comes down to the crosswalk and onto the sidewalk so that people are connected to the sidewalk here.
So that's an exit-only gate then?
Unless it were propped open by the city, like on a Saturday morning.
So you're limiting your entrances to the soccer field to that main entry and control it by... Can just for
we have that way everybody's parking here for the most part,
Yeah.
and they come in here, or they come in here,
Okay.
and then in, and then as George said, most of the time there'll be smaller games going, and they can walk between those, and there's really good circulation if they want to come over here. If they want to sit in between the smaller fields, the parents will just sit right in between there.
Okay, real quickly, because I'm extended my time, can you just trace the perimeter fence?
Sure.
Real quickly.
Starting here, it goes along the field, jogs here, all the way along here, and then becomes part of the pool fence here, goes into the building, picks up again over here, and then ties into the building here, gates here, along the skate park here, and then jogs up and comes along here, and then along the perimeter here, and then here.
Thank you. Is there any functional reason why the trellis has the trash has a trellis over it?
No functional reason.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Howard?
Thank you. What are these trees here?
Well, there's a number of possibilities. The idea is some kind of accent or shade tree.
To create an alley of
Yes.
shady alley.
Yes.
So are these deciduous trees or evergreens?
Anna, we have several choices. Are they deciduous and evergreen choices, or?
We do. We have a couple options for each category. And,
I was just interested in these guys that form the formal access to the site. Flowering?
Sorry.
Flowering.
Could the applicant come to announce
on up.
themselves and come and speak into the microphone for the record?
yeah, we have a couple well-suited species in mind. Right on it.
If you could please introduce yourself for the record, please.
Sure. My
Yeah.
name is Anna Schmitz. I'm with the RRM Design Group. And here we have a variety of canopy shade trees as well as flowering accent trees.
You need to be a little closer to that.
Sure. And you can see we have a variety of options for both the canopy shade trees as well as flowering accent trees. And palms are reserved for specimen planting.
What is this material right here?
We're envisioning that as wood stamped concrete. It was a
And this?
that as well.
Also.
It was a previous comment in 2018 where we were asked to explore the textures of the ground plane materials. And while we had proposed that before, we thought it was a nice variation from your standard gray concrete.
So is that, then would that be the case over here where you have paving materials? Like this looks like it might be DG or something.
There, that's correct. We have decomposed granite proposed outside of the primary circulation routes in an effort to reduce the heat island effect. And then in those small pockets, those would be integrally colored concrete with the sandblast finish and decorative scoring.
And around the pool?
That was probably likely to be standard gray with the sandblast finish and scoring.
There is a concern about cost overall with the park, so I think our emphasis would be to have the circulation be highlighted.
So this playing field looks large. Is it an AYSO standard regulation size playing field, or is it anything you want, or is it just fitting the block, or what?
Well, they've moved the way they've sized fields has changed, and now they're based on the number of players, 11v11 or 7v7. This is a field that could be used in the proper fashion to hold an 11v11 game. It's not the size of like at the UCSB Stadium, where you're going to have a college game.
Is that larger?
That's larger. So the intent here is to have a field that can be functional, but with enough room that you can fit the three smaller fields going this way with space in between. And that, to some degree, help dictate the size of the outer field.
Okay. And this fence material, this fence that goes around the site, I see a picture, but I don't have a sense of the material and the spacing and the height of the, what is it? What is it?
It's intended to be a metal fence, either black or brown, similar to the one George referenced that you previously approved. And it's...
What page is that picture of the fence?
L8.
Thank you.
I mean, in the sketch, we show something that protrudes through the top of it. There was a reference earlier to Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden. So I think we're looking for comments on the fence, but the intention is we know what was approved on a recent park, so we thought it would be maybe similar to what you have at the baseball field.
So I'm not exactly sure what there is at the baseball field, but these hollow tubes, horizontal rails, hollow tube, and vertical elements, hollow tube, tack welded on, are these?
I'm assuming
like solid stock.
I'm assuming from a cost standpoint they would be hollow metal.
For the amount of fencing that we are proposing here, we would look to propose a hollow tube.
Okay.
We can certainly come back with samples and details on that.
So I notice that from my recollection of the previous scheme, in which there were many comments, that, let's look at the site plan once again. The program has ramped up so that you have a lot of...
It's not a question.
There's a question? So there will be a question about that.
Now's the time for
Yeah.
the question.
How has the program changed from the time that you submitted it?
It's the same program. We have all the same elements. Everything that's on here was on the previous plan.
This has become much larger.
It did become bigger.
How did
yeah.
that happen?
We had not had skate parks are so specific that what we had in the previous plan was a concept for a skate park, but we did not have specific engagement with skaters. So subsequent to the concept plan being approved by the City Council and the Parks Commission, there were neighborhood meetings, and then we held a skate workshop. And the skaters use clay. There's a whole process, and they spent about 3 hours with the skate designer. And what happened is to make it functional in terms of how the events flow from one to another transition-wise, we didn't have enough space.
Let me add one more thing. The skate park did become larger, and in turn, the playground actually shrunk down. And one of those aspects that we looked at is the ongoing replacement costs for playground equipment. They have about a 10-year life cycle, as well as all of the resilient rubber surfacing needs to be replaced. So given that we have ample space for a good-sized playground here that will really serve the picnicking families and the kids that are most likely going to use that play equipment, we don't need as much space dedicated to the playground. We can really accommodate that space, as we've shown, and the long-term ongoing replacement costs of concrete. This will be a 50-year plus structure that has a one-time installation cost rather than every 10 years spending 50 to 80,000 on replacement costs for playgrounds.
So if you were a parents of little kids and you had your grandmother and you wanted to go out and just have a little passive picnic area, sitting quietly, not listening to shrieking, screaming over here, and everybody having a great time around the pool and all the cheering and all this, where would you go in this park? Where's the quiet area?
It's going to be a much more active park than, say, Alice Keck Park.
I think that's the answer.
Probably what I would do. Frankly, because this park, one of the chief challenges was to not only incorporate what the neighbors and the community was looking for, but also to activate it so the park would become safe and usable based on where it is and what's happening in the park. There are some nice little spots, and I think it's going to be a place where whether you're 80 years old or you're a small child, this is definitely a place to be with your community.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, and we need to keep this moving along, so let's try and focus our questions on the aesthetics. A little bit less about the use, I think, is a more appropriate focus. So, Leon.
The public art locations, other than the murals and the two that you've described, are there further ones?
The murals were a primary focus based on some of the feedback we got from the community. There's the two that I mentioned, and then the surfaces of so the basketball court actually becomes an opportunity for community art. That's becoming a more common thing where the surface of the court is not just a plain surface, and possibly within this skate park and other paved surfaces.
Can you maybe point out the locations for that are on the building?
The murals, I believe there's one on this side, Elijah, over here, and then on the over here. Why don't you do that?
So along the street side of the changing room wing, right here, and then along the main axis here on the restroom wing, we also have a few spots, and then on the pool equipment building, both this side and the back side, we've framed out areas here and here.
You may have described the lighting in the south half of the park, but if you did, I didn't comprehend it. Would you?
Yeah, I don't think I did actually. The park will be closed at night, but because there will be athletic, practices, et cetera, at night, we would have lighting, safety lighting, task lighting as you walk through the park. We don't have the fixtures cited on the plan, though.
But to give some frame of reference, it would probably be similar to something that we just installed at Cabrillo Ballpark on Cabrillo and Milpas, which is a 14-foot tall fixture and stand. Kind of our park standard now.
We'll see that next time.
Yes.
So the soccer field is artificial turf?
Correct.
Yes.
And is there any other artificial turf in the park?
No, just the field.
So where it's green is irrigated sod?
Correct.
Except
There's shrub areas. We have a number of shrub areas that are kind of not quite as a bright green.
Was there any consideration given to where vendors might be?
Vendors.
What type of vendors?
Somebody wanting to sell hot dogs.
No.
It seems like that might happen. The texture of the concrete, I think perhaps has been described, but would you say generally speaking that there's not any just plain gray concrete?
What, George, you might want to answer from a budget standpoint, what you're expecting and.
I think the plan shows most of the texture concrete in kind of that T pattern delineating the main passageways through the park. We may have regular gray concrete along the secondary pathway coming right here. And then certainly within the skate park itself, we'll most likely go towards just a plain gray concrete.
And have you given consideration to color?
Not at this point yet. We'll certainly look at that a little bit more in detail, but again, it comes down to resiliency and cost and all the things that we need to be concerned about.
Thank you.
Quickly, Chair. Can you help me navigate, if I was on the site here, the points of entry and/or, I think I'm okay. Let me make sure. I'm going to get beeped. Can you help me? Can you point to the points of entry or exit starting down here, which is clear that that's the main entrance? So if you could help me.
Absolutely. So might want to reference the screen behind you as I point to this.
Yep.
We've got the main park entry here, mid-block. We've got a corner entry here, Salspuedes and Coda.
Got it.
We've got a mid-block entry here.
Number 54 area.
Correct.
Right there. Got it.
And then jumping to the other side, we've got an Ortega mid-block entry.
Got it.
We will still study this gated access here, whether that can be a two-way or exit only. Number 10 there.
Yep.
And then the entry into the pool area will not be an entry into the greater park. This will be a fenced perimeter around the swimming pool because we do need to have controlled access into that swimming pool area. But that'll be another entry into the park through the Welcome House building.
Okay. Next question, real quickly. During fall, if you will, in winter, when the sun is, let's say 5:30, it's dark. I can imagine the field being operational, especially for practices for young kids and soccer and stuff. Does the other entrances that prevent you from going to the field, would they be locked up, or would they be able to have access in?
We haven't really gotten to that point of operational procedures yet. But
I know it's not a design question, but if you could just, okay, very good. Okay. The baseball field, is it a little league sized field? Probably. Okay, very good. Next question. Is there backstops and stuff that are planned for field balls not to go into the street and to the neighbors?
Yes, there's number 52 labeled there is essentially the backstop there.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Before you launch. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have two little questions. This pool slide, the picture you have, the photo has water. Is there's no water here?
Sure. So this is actually that's a great question and very observant. This is actually a different type of exit along that pool exit. So it actually goes into essentially a trough of water. which is popular at a lot of parks nowadays. So you basically exit off of that slide into a trough of water, and operationally we don't have to treat and maintain a large body of water that really only serves one purpose, to get out of the slide and exit out on the pool deck.
So all of this is a great big experience that ends up in a puddle, right? I'm just curious. And then that puddle is not shown on this plan.
It stays within the
Part of the
It's in the
slide.
apparatus. It's flat at the bottom.
Oh, it's just a flat trough.
It ends there, and the water stays in and drains. Yeah.
The fun is coming down, not getting out.
And this rubberized, what do you call it, colored rubber surface, what's the purpose of that?
It's actually mandated through playground safety rules that we have to have what are called fall surfaces that are basically preventing concussion, severe injuries, and so forth. So it's a mandated product now, which also allows us to have accessibility to the play structure itself.
This being where do people fall down here?
Primarily off of the play equipment, so the colored pieces there underneath swings, slides, climbers.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's go into comments now. Mr. Watkins, start us out.
I want to thank you guys for all the effort. I mean, there was already a lot of work done the first iteration. It was pretty evident, and I think it's even more evident you guys have taken that a lot further and took all the comments that people made and really put a lot of focus on that and pushed it forward. A lot of my concerns that I had before about access and stuff, and mostly, or at least that engagement between the playground area and the soccer field, or removed by having that big, large gate in the middle. I think that helps a lot. My only little criticism of that would be if you guys could explore maybe adding a secondary gate. It doesn't have to be a primary, but maybe somewhere on the, I'm going to call it the west end, the short end of the field, where the cars are parked. Yeah, thank you guys. Only because if you're a parent and you're having to go from one end of that soccer field with your kids and you're bringing your own chair all the way across that field to that one spot when your car is kind of up there in the other end, you might get some curse words for the designers of the park. So just a thought. It doesn't have to be something that's opened all the time, but at least if that serves for larger events like little tournaments and things like that, where you guys could have that option to open up, I think just having those two-way access points could be a benefit. The redesign of that node and pushing that closer to the soccer field, I think all these engagements that you guys have done they're really nice in my mind. They stand alone on their own, where you could really spend times in each element of the park on its own, and still have an experience like that's unique to the rest of the park, which I think is really valuable. And then overall, though, I think there's a lot of engagement where you could just move through this park and have an entire day spent there, really. So I think that's effective. I really do like it, and I think the most important thing is that all these qualities of architecture and social and artistic benefits are serving the surrounding area. It ties in really well. It's very obvious that you guys are trying and draw in directly with the community that's right here, but also provide these services to the larger communities. I think that's a basic tenet of any design in town. I think you guys have nailed that pretty well. I think the architecture for the structures are designed really well. The massing and characteristics are all there, the scale, very strong. I would ask that those little features that you called out in your discussion, like the plank doors, the clavos, even things like the utility doors, that consistency is still maintained throughout the project. The thing like the trellises, I think those are nice features that soften all the edges. I think they're really effective too. Even the fencing that you guys called out, it's a much better improvement than what's there right now on site. So if you guys have the budget to maintain that throughout the project, maybe the design doesn't go as far as you'd hoped it to be, but even if it's retained as that wrought iron decorative fencing, I think that will maintain a step up and really give this park a new image, more or less, starting with the perimeter. That's really it. I think the only other little comment I would say is just look at your trees, because I think one of those renderings that you showed at that main entrance, the main access, there was a tree. There's these trees flanking that main entryway, but the rendering showed low planting. So I don't know which one's the guiding design principle, but maybe just flesh out that before the next meeting. And then it looks like over in front of the pump house, there's a tree there where that keynote number 24 is. So if I'm reading the plan right, there'd probably be some doors in front of there maybe off the street. I don't know if that tree's positioned accurately or not. But overall, again, I think there's so many benefits here, and growing up coming to this park in the daytime, never at night, but it's really nice to see this park finally getting a facelift like this, and I think it's going to be a huge benefit. So I appreciate you guys what you're doing right now. It's looking really good. Thank you.
Great, Richard.
Great project, well executed as in architecture and in land planning. My comments are, I think that the skateboard people had too strong a lobby, and as I mentioned in my questions, would like to see that access, 45-degree access through to the shade structure investigated. Maybe you go, the pedestrians go under and the skateboards people go over. I don't know, or just just reduce that amount of the program. And I think that little hook there, that extension beyond the triangle is really unfortunate. I get second. I get the. I'm taking back all my concerns about the extra spectator area in the fields because it's synthetic turf. I think that what you've shown, the minimum functional areas for the synthetic turf, and when you're inside the fence, you're seriously playing, and there's no lounging around except for intense looky-sees at the spectators as they're spectating. I think the architecture is very good. I think that it has a good public civil scale and design. I'm very pleased with it. With the high, with the new buildings anyway, the high plate heights and so forth. I think it's very well done. I would think what I do see lacking or concerned about is that there's none of these buildings here or here have solid overhangs and solid shade. You do have the shade for the trellises here, but there's kind of this third option when it's full shade and so forth. It seems to me that at least one or two of those buildings could have an arcade where people sit back and away from the heavy sun or rain. Minor things when you're looking at the area. I appreciate the areas for the murals and so forth on the buildings. I would be concerned that they're too structured, and I think less is more. If your architect, where would that be? I think you're limiting your artist and your opportunities for murals. It's got to be. The spaces for those, I think, are overstructured and should have more flexibility for the artist or for whatever happens, and they should be. Even if there's nothing there, it should look, like part of the building. Right now, it says, "Oh, what goes there?" So that's my point there. I don't think that there should be a trellis over the trash area unless a function. And I'm looking forward to a very intense study and review of the lighting locations, levels, and cutoffs, because I think even though there'll be hours, it's undetermined when those hours would be, so I think we should look at them as a permanent installation.
Which ones are those?
The lighting for the field. That's my comments.
Great. Howard.
I pretty much agree with Board Member Six's comments, particularly about the skate park area. I do think it is too big, long story short. I do think it would be desirable for the project to maintain this walkway through the park to connect to something up here where pedestrian circulation is maintained. I also agree with simplifying these smaller buildings. Where's that thing? Here and here. Getting rid of the frames so that, and also you also frame the water or the decorative features at each end, which is unnecessary. You've got a recess, you've got an arc, you've got a frame, you've got another. It's just too much. Simplifying. And I do agree with the comment about maybe an arcade on the southwest exposure here, or whatever the west exposure would help as you enter, and maybe on the opposite side as you face the pool, someplace nice to sit. And I understand about the use of the playing field and using smaller fields with fewer players and with seating, with seating, in the middle. I do think that this location, this area here, is pretty tight for any kind of viewing of a game if it decides to go to a large game. So you'll be, moving to the other field. But it would be nice to also have that flexibility of being able to sit, near the ends or end zone or in the middle to watch the game. I think those are the bleacher, so-called seating areas are a little tight. It would be nice to see the fencing material be something other than hollow tube. If there was an economical way to use, did you say, wrought iron decorative elements, as Board Member Watkins mentioned. And I think the board, is it board-formed concrete sidewalks? Is that what you said? Yeah, that might be nice. But I do think a texture and a color should be used along the walkways. I think the purple rubber surface is a little too playful. It'd be nice if it was grass colored or some sort of green color rubber, as opposed to a comical, what do you call it, a neon purple color. I know it's playful, but it seems you don't need, if people are having fun, they don't need that too. Those are my comments.
Okay, Leon.
Yes, I have 3 comments. First of all, I want to sort of applaud the underlying concept here that this is an activation place. I think that's really important to help us all bring ourselves away from the television set, and especially young people. And I think this is a way that supports that in a really important way. So I think I want to really applaud that. The other item is public art. It seems like there's a lot of locations yet that public art could be incorporated into the park. I think I agree with Mr. Six in saying that what is shown on the murals is a little bit structured. So I might suggest something in the way of public art that was something similar that's going on State Street at the moment, and that's invitational art, so that if you provided places for public art could be, there could be yearly invitational art displays if there were allocated places, especially from people within this community, the neighborhooding community, to bring, we frequently see very good examples of artists working on areas that we wish they wouldn't, and this might be a place that we could provide some places for that. And so I would encourage you to investigate the possibility of, I think the County Arts and Culture Committee might have some ideas about how this idea might be incorporated into it as far as invitational kinds of events. My last comment, I would like to see plain gray concrete minimized whenever possible. And the last point I'll make and reserve more comments on our later, is that the landscaping of this is very important, and it's a public park, and we're without the help of our landscape expert. And I think that's a disadvantage for us as a group here not to have that kind of advice. And I don't know how we deal with that, but it's certainly an important omission. That's all I have.
Okay, I will concur with my colleagues with respect to the architectural direction of the structures. I think that they're very, very, very nicely done. The scale, the materials used, the detailing. I think it also very much mimics the surrounding area and their architectural style, so I'm very much positive by that. Restrooms, if I see it correctly, there's only really one location for restrooms. I personally think that it's not enough. I did a quick scale and how far you have to travel. And if I remember correctly, the restrooms are right here. Let me see, the restroom right here, park restroom number 6. If you're playing in the field here, or the young kids are playing here, and let's say the parents are here, or here, you're here, and some of the kids need to go to the restroom, they have to go pretty much as 150, even more feet to use the restrooms here. I think that if you think of restroom use, the restrooms here are obviously focused on the activity areas. I would think that perhaps, if possible, having another restroom location that would serve the activity court, the fields, especially if the fields are still operational during the early evenings because of the AYSO or whatever, and the park may be shutting down, the skating, the play area, that to have someone go as much as over 150 feet to the restrooms which are here, really, if you can see, they're not part of the activities that are happening in the field. I think that should be explored. So restrooms, I think, can be improved, if you will, especially for one location. I don't know what if I'm accurate to this, and I accept it. I don't know everything. But engaging a part of the community is so important. They're just the life of a vibrant community. When I look at the activity area for the youth playground area, I see it right in the center of the park. Aesthetically and architecturally and the way it looks, I think, oh, that's fun. Okay, it's in there. All right, but what about at 6 o'clock at night, in the fall, in the winter, when the parents come home from work, dinner's been eaten already, and now you want to take a walk in the community? Do you want to go into this park that you have to check when the gates are going to be locked, not locked? And the youth activity area is deep inside. I like it because it is a central hub. On a Saturday or Sunday or in a summer day, that activity, I think, would engage everything. But does it engage in the fall or the winter the community that wants to take their kids and the dogs on a leash and go to a play area, sit on a park, and watch their kids play? To have it that deep, for me, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing programmatically, but I would imagine it, if it was in an area that was closer to the street, would provide more of a welcoming towards the community to use that. Just a thought. And again, if you said, you know what, our studies show that parks and communities are better here because of safety, because of activities, because of engagement, fine. But hopefully I've made a point to that, and how people, sometimes people will use the park at 6:30 at night for 20 minutes. Dinner's being made or going to be made, and you scoot over there, you walk your dog, pick up the poop, you let your kids play, and then you go back home and dinner's ready, or after dinner. Just a thought. This location may be problematic for that kind of activity. The long distances, as I mentioned, to get from here to here is over 150 feet. You may have a secondary entrance here, okay, but I see this as a long alleyway. There's these long alleyways. Okay, you got to get someplace, but I see that there's a lot of walking that has to be done to get to where you want to go. Again, that may be a good thing that may engage you with different activities that are happening in the park. But you can see that there is these long access points. That may be the nature of the design or the program that requires that. But a thought about that happening. Again, the center hub is in the center of the field, way back inside. You have to get into the park to engage this activity. It seems to me that it would be better if it engaged it here, created a sense of community, these activities that I mentioned, and then once you've engaged it, then go to the different activities that you have here. That's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I agree with the majority of those comments. It's a great project, and just focusing on the architecture briefly, I would say that the scale of what you're proposing is fine. I think some of the detailing is a little overzealous. I don't think you need all of this and then all of these little bits and pieces. This is not the library, so to speak. These are just simple buildings. And I think if you're concerned about your budget, these are going to be aspects that are expensive. So I would encourage you to really focus your attention on the elements that are important and that have real meaning. So, for instance, this simple water line and that detail, that's sufficient. I think that's all you need. I don't think you need all of these other little ups and downs and ins and outs and all that. Just these simple details. This rake detail is a classic detail. I think that's all you need.
You talking about the corbels? These corbels that appear?
Yeah, I think you could just do those on the end possibly and not do intermediates.
Run it all the way across.
Or just run it all the way across. So I think you could downshift a little bit more, and if that gets you other elements in the park, that's a trade-off that I think would be acceptable in my mind. Okay.
I have one more comment. In regards to the fence, I have an idea that you might explore 2 levels of fence. Wrought iron at the special openings, and then in a little different, simpler design for the tube railing for the remainder.
That's a good point. Okay. So we still need a motion.
Concept review?
This is concept review. So why don't I try and just list these elements that I noticed that were being repeated, and then let's see if somebody wants to make that a motion. So overall, the board feels it's a great project, huge improvement, and thanks you for listening to the community and to our suggestions for making this project better. The majority of our access concerns are satisfied, but the board feels that the soccer field still needs a second or even a third entry, a viable, real entry for people to come in and out quickly rather than having to go all the way through the park. The scale of the proposed structures is acceptable. The style is acceptable. The detailing could be minimized. They're, as depicted currently, they're a little over-designed and could be a little bit more simple. The small details, for instance, the way you've depicted the doors with sort of classic Santa Barbara style elements is nice. I think we'd like to see those elements remain, but the plaster surrounds and various corbels, etc., could be minimized. In general, the board feels that the skate area could be reworked to allow the, which corner is this? South. Coda South Salsapuedes axis to continue straight through, and whether that's through an element or in conjunction with this skate park element, but the pedestrian experience should be the primary experience through that area. The board appreciates the attention to public art and possible mural locations, but study providing less structured locations. Let it be a little bit more organic, I think, is the message. We would like to see lighting studies, particularly for the ball field, and photometrics to show that the light levels will be acceptable off the property, and provide lighting specifications for and locations for the remainder of the site. Study the possibility of providing a true wrought iron gate at the entry locations, at the major entry locations, and possibly transition to a less expensive version around the ball field, etc. Study possible color alternatives to the bright rubber playground underlayment. Consider more locations for public art, but possibly temporary locations by invitation, so the surrounding public can have a little bit more opportunity. Try to minimize standard gray concrete. And we need some additional landscape input either from the HLC landscape architect or from an alternative review body. Okay, that's what I wrote down.
Pretty good.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Was there enough rationale to suggest extra canopies or arcades at the pool structures for full heavy shade or alternative options for trellis or budget? I think that we should suggest here. I think the motion should include exploration of arcades and full shade cover at the pool areas, at the buildings.
The welcome building?
In particular.
Yeah.
So let's be specific. You're saying on the
Yeah,
backs?
either arcade here or here, somewhere that makes sense to give it that third option. And I guess I'll let the little trellis over the trash enclosure go, but it seems weak, and I would like to see it studied, but it doesn't need to be part of the motion.
You can, would the seconder of the motion
I'm
accept
good with
those changes?
Yes, good.
Okay. So was
I have a comment.
Was Leon, did you second the motion, or did Howard?
I did.
Howard, you did. Okay.
I tried.
We have the motion by Six, seconded by Witosh.
Okay, great.
It's on
So,
record now.
yes.
My last act.
Seems like several of us have talked about the entrances into the park, and I'm thinking that it might, we didn't say this, it might be helpful to say that what we're looking for here is visual entrance into the park, that that's helpful to be able to see into this park and identify that. I'm not sure that will change the motion, but.
When you say visual, are you talking about making the entrance more visible, or that you can see
Into the park,
into
so
the
that there's
park?
clear pathways, visual pathways into the park.
If I may, I think it's there. There's only a wrought iron fence between you and most of the. So.
I agree with the decorative wrought iron gate fence surrounding the entrances will do exactly that.
Okay.
I would want to add one other thing too. I think Mr. Insua's point about a second restroom, I do agree that this is a long walk. And when people are playing in the, at the north end of the park or whatever, it would be good to have another small restroom building somewhere.
Mr. Chair, I would not add that to my motion. It's a functional thing, and they've thought this out, and it's not an aesthetic issue, so I would not add that to my motion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
They can consider it. But.
Anyway, consider it, whatever. Yeah, I'm not going to withdraw my second over a restroom.
And Mr. Chair, Board Member 6 and Board Member Witash, is that a indefinite continuance, or what is the motion?
What would the
for?
applicant want? Indefinite.
Okay, is there any more discussion?
As not in my motion, but as a post item, do not like to see this amount of synthetic turf. I wish it could be real turf.
I agree with that too.
So it's not a part of the motion?
Not part of the motion.
You're just
It's a
making
statement.
that statement.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's our discussion, let's read that motion back, if we could.
We have an indefinite continuance back to the full board. The board finds that this is a great project and a huge improvement for the site, that the majority of the access concerns have been addressed, but that the soccer field needs a second and third entry. The scale of structures is okay, and the style is okay, and the classic Santa Barbara detailing is good, but that the applicant should minimize plaster surrounds and corbels. That the applicant study the relationship between the pedestrian and skate park interface, and to emphasize pedestrian experience between the two. Study providing less.
Sorry, let's edit that. So the southwest axis
Okay.
shall be
Continuous.
Shall be continuous and be primarily pedestrian, or
Primarily pedestrian.
shall have, yeah. And any skateboard park elements shall be secondary to that.
Not interrupt it.
I mean, it's Ortega, it's the south entrance.
South. Does that make sense?
That's clear.
Both the maker of the motion and the seconder are
Absolutely.
okay with that change.
Study providing less structured location for art. Provide lighting studies and photometrics for the ball field to ensure that it will not be a nuisance to neighbors. That the applicant provide lighting fixtures moving forward. That they study using a wrought iron gate at entries and a less expensive
fencing.
Material around the ball field, etc. That the applicant minimize standard grade concrete in the project. That the HLC landscape reviewer look at the project. That a full canopy or arcade should be incorporated into the pool area. That the applicant study an alternative to the bright rubber playground underlayment, and that the applicant study locations for temporary art.
Is that accurate?
I just add, just to simplify in your comments about the architecture and reducing the surrounds, just say the word simplify in addition to what you've already said.
Rather than minimize, say simplify plaster surrounds and corbels.
Just simplify the architecture.
Simplify architecture.
Less busy.
Okay. So we had a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Nice
Thank you.
project.
Thank you. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I'd like to have some discussion about the need for help with landscaping here that we're not getting. It's a huge project, landscape project.
Yeah.
I just would like to know what we might expect.
I just wanted to make a quick announcement, Mr. Chair and board members, and for the benefit of the public. Items 3 and 5 have been postponed from today's agenda. They will be heard on the September 23rd agenda. That is the 15 South Alisos and 16 West Mission. Those have both been postponed to the next agenda. We made that announcement at the beginning of the meeting, but I noticed quite a number of people from the public coming, and I just want to make sure that they aren't waiting for nothing.
Great. Thank you.
It's yours?
To answer your question, Leon, so unfortunately, this is the cards we've been dealt as far as the members of this board. There are opportunities potentially for new board members to make applications, and hopefully some of those are landscape professionals. Otherwise, our standard practice is
I understand that, but it doesn't
Okay.
solve this great need.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I just ask a question. When the HLC landscape architect reviews the drawing, is he obligated to review the video and
I'm not sure how
in
that.
conjunction with his review? I would recommend that, in particular with this case, because there were several concerns regarding the landscaping.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't think we require it, but I will suggest it. But I do want to move on from this project since we closed the item.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 is 1317 Punta Gorda Street. And this is a proposal for 7 new residential duplexes developed under the average unit size density program. Project includes demolition of an existing single residential unit, asphalt driveway and site paving, and the construction of 4 residential structures housing 14 two-bedroom units, ranging in size from 815 to 1,034 square feet, with an average unit size of 896 square feet. The proposed density for this 23,847 square foot parcel is 25 dwelling units per acre on a site with a general plan designation of medium-high density, which allows 15 to 27 dwelling units per acre. Additional site improvements include a new parking lot with 14 parking spaces for the residential units, a permeable paver driveway, bicycle parking, common areas, fencing paths, paved and landscaped area, and trash enclosure. Project design approval is requested. Project requires compliance with project compatibility analysis, and the following guidelines: urban design guidelines, infill design guidelines, and outdoor lighting design guidelines. And it was last here on May 6th of 2019.
Mr. Chair, board members, I do have some comments about this project.
Great.
This project is one that just went through our application completeness. It's a part of the California Permit Streamlining Act. It requires local jurisdictions to review projects that are submitted for action within 30 days of their submittal. Once it's deemed complete, decision bodies have 60 days to make a decision, either yes or no, on a project. And the applicant can request a one-time extension of, I believe, another 30 days. So this was deemed complete, I believe, in September of I'm sorry, I don't have that date in front of me. It will be helpful. I can get that information. I thought it was on the agenda. It was initially on the agenda. But so this board will have 60 days to make a decision up or down on this. The applicant did come with a previous site plan that the board found amenable due to the impending inclusionary requirements for AUD projects that went into effect at the end of August. The applicant had submitted a different site plan for you to review. So the board, this is a previous site plan that the board didn't find as great as the second one. So it's a little awkward, but this is where we are right now, and this one has been deemed complete and reviewed for development standards.
Okay. So to be specific about the Permit Streamlining Act.
Yes.
And these are general questions, which I think will help the board understand this. So there's a timeline of 60 days.
Correct.
From the point of the project being deemed complete from a land use?
Correct, yeah.
How does design review figure into that?
Sure. So our current process is, or had been for a while, very non-compliant with the Permit Streamlining Act. It was, this is a part of our effort to become compliant with it, and so we are once the board finds that a design is acceptable, you'll state so in a motion. It will then go through a completeness review. We are doing a training this Friday for board members that will go more into detail on this. I don't want to go super into detail, but this project has been deemed complete, and this board has, at this time, 60 days to take an up or down vote on the project. So an indefinite continuance in this case would not be an option. We'll need a continuance to an exact date, just so that we can ensure that this project gets its appropriate action in that time.
If you could introduce yourselves.
Yes, I'll help explain. Project architect Tom Oxner.
Chuck McClure, landscape architect.
Welcome back.
Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. It's unusual. So your board looked at these drawings some time ago and was in relative favor of making comments that it was ready to maybe return for project design review. So we took the project back and we started developing the site plan, and we decided, in looking at this site plan compared to the other site plan, and I'm going to just open up the other site plan. There was it seemed to us that it just, with the, it just seemed like the consolidation of the larger building seemed to reduce the intimacy of the space between the buildings. And sure, the clustering of the buildings allowed for a larger open space. It lost a bit of the intimacy that the original site plan had. So at that time, the intent was to come back to you with a real sketchy site plan. And we had just a sketchy site plan, and we just wanted to get the board's feel on maybe pursuing that, because it was kind of a mixed board, and there were some people that were in favor and some people that weren't. So we submitted the sketchy plan to the process, and the process, because it had received recommendation for a PDA at the prior meeting, we got thrown into the whole process of getting through all the departments. And it wasn't until I was halfway through this I realized, hey, we're just trying to get back in front of ABR to see if the changes, we made some changes to this, to the original site plan that was kind of mixed review, and the architecture. We thought we dealt with maybe some of the architectural comments. And so next thing you know, we've got, we're in the middle of this 30-day review, and there's a timeline, and it wasn't our intent at all. It wasn't our intent to put this board in a situation that you're in. You're not expecting to see this project, and we're not we know the risk that this project is here. So all we really tried to do was just to see, I want to go through the proposed project and the changes that we made and just see if there's enough support to maybe spur on the changes that we had made to the original project. So at this time, I think I made those points here.
Mr. Chair and board members, just for your information, this project does require action by October 26th. I told you I'd get that date. So
Say that again?
this project requires action by October 26th under the permit stream element.
Action, you mean
An up or down vote.
by us? Okay.
Project design.
I apologize for putting you guys in that position. It wasn't the intent, so I will go through the changes here that we've looked at. So this is the proposed site plan. So what we've done is we looked at before we had this larger open area, and we took down the fences between the units. So the idea was to distribute the open space partially between the alternate open area. The alternate open area design allows for a 15% open space where the minimum common open space is 20 by 20. In our case, we've got a 20 by 40 space, and we've taken the rest of the area and we've split it around between the units. The advantage of this is it provides sort of a combination, and it meets the criteria of the alternate open space. Obviously, it was reviewed by staff. The idea was to still provide ground level access to all the buildings and gardens and dogs, and a sense of equality between the buildings themselves, and sort of a sense of a unity as the inclusionary requirement comes along and starts requiring affordable units. I think these sort of equal design units where you've got materials and colors and landscaping to help distinguish, and there's a sense of everyone kind of has the same amenities throughout the site. I think there is some advantage to that. This design also took the bike barn and put it in between the buildings, so it's an actual interior space, and it's well put for the bikes. The trash area got larger. The landscape plan is basically similar. Chuck can go over that, but it's a similar site plan to what you had seen before. We weren't required to completely redo that for this process, so we backed off, knowing that this is a tentative approach here. Let's see. So we've got the alternate open space is that hybrid. I'm not sure how many times this board has seen it, but it seems like it works really well for the distribution of the buildings on this lot. In terms of the units are the same size. They're small units. These are 900 square foot units each, with basically 10 feet between them. And it really is a nice scale. I've worked on several projects that have the same proportions and scale, and it seems, this has more hardscape than what we're proposing here. But in terms of the scale between the buildings and the size, these are really small units. It really is a comfortable density and airspace around the buildings. Let's see, in terms of the site plan, we've got, so the idea now is to sort of a common open space between the buildings, more of a sense of community than as many fences as we had before. We'll go to the roof plan. So we've mixed up a variety of gables and some dormers throughout. I've had to go through and develop all of the elevations for every unit just to be at this point. So it wasn't the intent originally. It took us some time to do it. But so the concept here is a traditional looking home with a variety of horizontal siding and board and batten, traditional windows with window trim, rakes and eaves that are in proportion to the neighborhood. I've got a 8-foot ceilings at each floor. The swimp is all figured out, the civil. I have it if anyone would care to look at it. The design did require some of the buildings to be modified to meet the requirements. So basically what we have is, and I can go through if you're interested, I can probably come back on the questions because I really don't know how you feel, you guys are going to feel about this. But anyway, so what we've done is taken, these are the elevations and we've mixed them up with color, with material. And we were trying to propose a sense of variety within the roof materials as well in terms of color. But the idea here then is to create a similarity, sort of an equality of design through the units, but at the same time a little bit of differentiation.
That's what you see if you're standing right here. You see.
We've got, this is the bike barn entry, so this is the front of that duplex that faces this Punta Gorda. This is the duplex that faces Punta Gorda. On the last page, it looks like that. There it is. There's the duplex that faces. So we've traded in those flat roofed elements for traditional shed roofed entries. This is what you'd see in Punta Gorda, the scale of this, 24 feet to the top. And that duplex is what you'd see as you're coming into the development. This is the bike barn. The trash is right here. And the color palette is sort of this muted traditional colors that is a little trendy now, but it seems to have a little bit of master power, I think. So, I'm not really good at the landscape shot.
I have, as Tom mentioned, I have not adjusted the fences, but the point is it's going to be a durable, long-lived, appropriately designed. It's going to be a very good landscape equipment. That's what this is not exactly. There's some different fence lines and such, but this does give you a sense of the level of.
This is at the front. Yeah, this is what
we're going to have out there.
It's the front unit. Back unit.
And these things are durable, and they're going to mature to a size that's appropriate. So there's not a lot of trimming, and it's shrubs and ground covers that'll be around for 20 to 25 to 30 years. It's not the flash in the pan type landscape where things jump out of the ground and then become weak wooded and just go into a decay.
Make sure that's on.
It's on.
So
Just have to talk into it.
Okay, sure.
So the path of least resistance obviously would have been for us to just go and develop the last scheme that we had, and that's what I probably should have done. Once I saw where I was, it was too far to turn back, so that's where we are. Again, I apologize for putting you guys in this position. That was not the intent.
Okay. Do you want to add anything else?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any speaker slips for this? We do have one request to speak from Anna Marie Gott. It doesn't appear that she is here. Would anyone else in the audience like to address this project? Seeing no one.
Mr. Chair?
We'll close public comment. We did have a number of emailed letters regarding this project.
Mr. Chair, with regard to Anna Marie Gott, I spoke with her in the lobby, and she had to leave because of a medical issue. She simply asked that we look seriously at the waiver with regard to the open yard space.
Okay. Okay. We've closed public comment and move on to questions. Why don't we start down here?
No questions from now.
Okay, Leon?
Question is for staff.
Okay.
So we have until October 24th to make an up or down.
October 26th, yes.
And so the dilemma that we have here, is it solved by voting against the project? Does that relieve some of the pressure that is here?
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that question. Are you asking if denying the project would solve the issue of?
Resolve the issue of the crunch that's being experienced and what's being presented to us?
So the time frame requires either an approval or denial in
Yes.
that time. A denial of the project would send the project away. It would deny the project. The project wouldn't come back and could not apply for project design approval under the same proposal for, I believe, at least a year.
Just treat this as you would normally treat your project design approvals. Look at it. If it's not ready for today, we'll give it as much comment as you can to get them where they need to be, and we'll get them back on as soon as we can.
And to clarify, the reason why staff initiated its application completeness review was because of comments that the board had made about this being ready for project design approval. Now, we understand that the site planning is different, but it was just due to the time constraint with inclusionary housing.
Okay. Any question? All right. Bob?
I don't have any questions.
All right.
I'm curious about this building that you're proposing in the landscape plan. Appears to be different than the building proposed in the architectural plan. What's going on?
Yes, so what's going on is that we weren't required to revise the landscape plan for the PDA processing within the city, and we weren't looking forward to putting any more energy into a project that we knew your board had very, mixed reviews on. So, again, our intent was to get here with a much looser concept for you rather than to be here.
This is the correct plan?
This is the correct plan. The landscape plan has not been updated to that, but it's very close.
And this is a question for staff and our board. So when we last looked at this, we said that the buildings, the site plan was ready for PDA, but why didn't we give it?
Because
ready for it.
Yes, so it was still under conceptual review. It was the second review or the third review.
Right.
Yeah.
So the buildings were different then, a little different.
They were different.
But essentially the materials, the eaves, the roof materials, so forth, are similar?
Similar, yes, the same materials, similar materials.
Colors different, but.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's the same project, really.
Yes, it's the same project. It's
Same number
configured.
of units.
Same number of units, same density, same parking.
Okay, I get it. Thank you. That's all I have. Question.
Okay, so I think it would just be helpful to do a quick comparison somehow here. So before we had kind of a long building in the back. We've broken that up slightly now.
A little gap right there. A little gap right there.
So how would you say you modify this?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a large building, and it reads the second floors go over and they connect, and it requires the rear yards to exit through basically tunnels here, and it creates sort of a large building mass. This is just taking them and separating the buildings. The AUD and the building code looks at 10 feet as kind of a magic number, and and the density that it has here, it allows for a good. It just kind of fits. And so this is the design. What this accomplishes is a greater common open space, which is a good thing. What it tends to lose, and this is why we're here, darn myself, is that it loses the commonality and the open air between the smaller scale buildings, and that's what caused us to deviate.
Great, that's perfect. Okay, Richard?
Just one question. Overall height between your new and your old to your roof?
So these are 24, and I think the old couldn't be any.
The new are 24.6. What was the old, do you know?
I've got it right here. Here, 26.
26?
Yes.
So basically the same. Oh, 26. Okay, thank
The old
you.
is 26.
All right, thank you.
Just a couple of questions. I noticed that the roofing material in this scheme is different than what was shown at the most similar resembling iteration before, which I think was like metal roofing. Was that a decision made because you guys, or I guess I should ask the question is, what's the predominant roofing material that you found in the surrounding neighborhood?
Comp shingles.
So this is a pretty compatible material with what you're
Yes,
finding
what
already?
we've done is, on this scheme, we've gone back to the original comments, and a lot of the comments dealt with the incompatibility of the contemporary architecture, so we turned that to a neighborhood response. As you recall, this was the original. And then, as far as the site plan, we did gain more open yard, but instead of in one common area, it turned out to be more spread out between the units.
Okay. And the materials, like you're saying, that wood siding that was there, there weren't very many examples, or were there?
There were a lot of examples of wood siding, plaster and wood siding in the neighborhood and comp shingles.
But not that modern effect that you guys were
Right,
using to
exactly.
blend up the
And that
massing?
was- Yes, not very many modern.
So you feel like this scheme now is better resembling what you're finding in the surrounding neighborhood?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then I guess, I think you've hashed in different ways, but the private yards, have any of them diminished in any way since your guys' last schemes? When you had the smaller cluster?
The sizes of the yards are basically the same. The fences have come down so that they have now meeting the alternative design, which is really all about the, a common area rather than the smaller common space and the minimum dimension private open spaces throughout each unit. So
Okay.
that's the concept change.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. And just one follow-up question for staff. This project requires a waiver from us?
Yes, so this requires I guess it is a waiver, but it's a alternative. It's an approval of an alternative open yard design. So because you're waiving the normal requirements for, but yeah.
So essentially, the private open space, the private open yard design, the privacy goes away because the fences are gone. So it's essentially all common open space.
Correct. So the requirement for an alternative open yard design is a singular location that is deemed common open space, and that has to have a minimum dimension of either 15 or 20 by 20. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the thinking is that you provide a community space, you don't need the private outdoor living space. And that was I think it sort of was born out of the AUD, sort of the understanding that we're going to have bigger projects on smaller lots. So, but it's widely used on a number of different types of projects nowadays.
So it's permissible by the ordinance and the AUD. It's not necessarily a waiver. It's just something that's granted by the ordinance that we can approve.
Yes. So the board is the decision-making body on that waiver. We'll just call it a waiver. I think it is actually considered a waiver. So it is a waiver that the board can approve if they feel that the amenities of the common open space meet the or may allow for enough outdoor area for everyone on site.
Okay, great. Let's go to comments then. Want to start, Ivan?
I don't think we've ever, except from the very beginning, had issues with the architecture of the structure. So the direction it's taken, I think, is consistent with what we were originally inspiring the applicant to go. I think the biggest challenge for me was the siting of the structures on the site and creating a bit of a community, if you will, within the property lines. And I think it's still struggling with that. So I think it's still struggling with the site orientation of the structures in relationship to the walkways, the relationships between the structures, not a lot of undulation back and forth. When you look at an elevation, it looks very nice. I mean, it's very nice. But for me, when I see these elevations and I see them, how close they are to one another, I don't think we're going to see that elevation in the interest of that elevation very much. We're going to see, I think, predominantly a tight area between structures. So for me, the site has been the challenge. So I'll leave it at that. The site, I think, is still challenged with something that I think would enhance the the quality of life and the accessing and the way that you navigate through this project.
Okay. Yeah.
No comments.
Bob?
I think Member Insua makes a good point regarding the layout of the site, but given the density, I'm not sure how much relief can be provided. I might suggest that the applicant try turning the units, the buildings, on an angle. That may result in issues of setbacks between buildings, but I think that might be worth exploring. One of my original objections to this project was the contemporary architecture, and I think the applicant's done a good job of resolving that for me. I like the fact that even though we're in favor of the revised site plan with the one larger building, seeing this now with the architecture that is being proposed, I think it actually relates to the neighborhood in a better way. And I think, in terms of compatibility with adjacent structures, this does the job. So, again, possibly fooling with the layout of the buildings to maybe set them at an angle or odd angles to each other. I don't know if that would resolve anything, but I think that it might be worth exploring. It wouldn't be a deal killer for me to approve this as proposed because I do think it's improved. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, board members, just for your information, this for the alternative open yard design, there are some required findings when you are deciding whether or not the alternative open yard design is appropriate. Number one, that the alternative open yard design is necessary to provide flexibility in architectural style or site organization, such as the preservation of natural features, enhanced circulation, shared amenities, or the protection and creation of scenic views. And B, approval of the open yard design will meet the purpose of the required open yard as described in this section.
Okay. Howard?
I pretty much agree with Board Member Cunningham's comments. And I guess when we originally looked at this, we used the phrase that this looked so much like a project. And I think that by returning it to the layout that you have there of 6 buildings and pretty much the same separation, building separation between buildings, it has assumed some of that quality. But I also think that the architectural changes that you've made, and I definitely agree with the idea of possible rotation, tweaking the buildings 3 degrees, just 3 degrees. And varying the setbacks here, maybe putting the fin and the patio over here, or varying that. You've got a pretty big setback here. You could maybe undulate a little more and rotate a little bit, translate and rotate to get some, break up the monotony and have it be less project-like. But to me, this project is an affordable project. It is neighborhood compatible, and it is a huge improvement over what we saw originally.
Okay. My thoughts are similar to Howard's. I prefer livability-wise, this is a better solution for the occupants. Gives them more flexibility with their yard spaces and all that. So I think I'm certainly in favor of the waiver for the alternative yard. But where I think this project struggles is in that it's so regular that it's, even though you put different materials on the facades, everything is still so similar, and they're mirrored, units are mirrored, and so the windows are the same here as they are here. And I think this project would be so much better if there were moments where you made substantial changes to the typical layout. You know, for instance, here you have a kind of a conflict between these two kitchens. You have a corner situation, but then this kitchen window is looking out towards here, and there's going to be privacy issues with that. You know, that's an opportunity to make a difference and to have that express itself in the elevation, so it's not a regular thing. I don't think it's going to take much, but just something to change it from the same repetition. And I think the reason that the board was finding the last proposal acceptable, where there was more of a long building, was that took some of that regularity out of the equation and took it away from being sort of more the barracks kind of a repetition of the layout. So that's why that was successful, I think. Here, I mean, your footprints are pretty much the same, right, for each building. So I think just changing the dimensions of those footprints would be, and proportions of those footprints would help. And that's going to do things to your roof lines, and that'll just, I think, make the project better.
Richard?
Yes, I was in favor of this site plan very distinctly the first time, and it's by far better use of the site, and it gives more amenities and private space and a sense of ownership and territory to each of the residents. So I commend the architect and the owner coming back and sticking their neck out and getting this back again. I appreciate that. I think that as far as the regularity, I think that that's the part of the charm of the thing. It's you know, cute little boxes all in a row, and I have no qualms or problem with that. I think that's the strength of the design. Let's call a duck when it quacks like one. The only thing that I would want to do is on the front building on its south elevation, 6.2 or 3, is that I would do your one or two of your California. Do one or two of your California gables along here. It's just, you know, because it's introduced to the neighbor no matter how much it views. It's
like that?
Yeah, like that. I think that one suffers a little bit of boredom, but I commend. I think the project is very successful, and I appreciate the architecture going toward more resonating with the neighborhood.
I agree with Board Member Six's comments and Board Member Cunningham's as well. I think there's an efficiency of the plan that works out here with multifamily housing that is kind of inherent sometimes, and I think on bigger scale projects of that program, that starts to be the driver, and then everything just becomes very bulky and heavy, and then we have to accept it kind of for what it is. I think this scheme, I think you touched on it in your presentation, this idea of intimacy. I think this is very evident in this kind of scheme. Each unit stands alone. There is a repetition in plan, but I think what you've done with this roof plans and provided some variation in them that you don't really see in the floor plan, I think that helps each one be distinguished as distinct. If we can go to maybe A6.1, I think that's demonstrated pretty well there. I mean, the fact that you've started playing with color, material, you know, the way the horizontal siding and the vertical siding transitions like that. And then even though I loved the material palette you guys had that first round, I think that you've considered that maybe a little bit too strong for the area and gone back with calm shingles and hardwood siding that you find in there predominantly. I think that's a very respectful direction. I appreciate that. It's still, with this design, it doesn't lose that individual character that I think is setting up pretty strongly there because of what your roof lines are doing. Board Member Six's comments about adding some California framing, maybe at the front duplex, I think that could help on that adjacent neighbor's elevation for some a little bit more character right there. but I'm in support of it. I think it's a very strong design. I appreciate the fact that there's privacy and intimacy that's gained from this type of scheme that I personally haven't seen on any multifamily housing projects of this number of units that have come through the board yet. So I think it's a really nice direction that really embodies what our community at large kind of values. And also with this immediate neighborhood, this scale is very appropriate for the immediate neighborhood right there. It doesn't seem out of place at all. Your open yard design, I think it's appropriate given that it does enhance the architecture and the program itself. I think it's a correlation there, and I think it works really for what you're trying to achieve on this really kind of differently shaped lot. And I agree the fact that there's shared amenities, this type of living I think would promote actual engagement with your neighbors in a certain way, and I think that's going to be defined once you start getting landscape and how you start working with landscape and hardscape and things like that, the structural features. And this is unique, so I hope long term that this becomes kind of a prototype of a direction of multifamily housing in our community that is sustainable for future. So I think I'm totally supportive of that open yard design based on those merits. So I appreciate everything that you guys are proposing on it.
Okay. A motion.
So, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion for project design. Can we do that? Yes, we can. Project design approval. As submitted, with the exception of additional gables at the south elevation of the units 1 and 2, that the project meets the compatibility analysis.
Please.
I do not know whether it meets compliance with the city charter or a municipal code, so I will drop that from my statement.
Unfortunately, we need that.
Yeah, we have. So this project has been reviewed for compliance with the municipal code and all city charters. So staff can assure you.
So
that
I
it
hear
complies.
from the staff, and hearing nothing otherwise, the project is compliable with this. It complies with the city charter and municipal code, and it is consistent with the design guidelines applicable to the location of the project, being that the neighborhood is of mixed, what would you call it, low, relaxed residential architecture and materials. It's compatible with the architectural character of the city and the neighborhood for that same reason. It is appropriate mass bulk and scale to the neighborhood, given the neighborhood is composed of both, has a number of second-story structures in its proximity. It is sensitive or does not have any adjacent landmarks or historic resources that would be affected by its location. Neither does its location affect any public views of the ocean or mountains, and it is a good use of open space and landscaping, and that the board sees that the alternate open yard arrangement is acceptable and put to good use in this project, as it provides a number of personal and territorial spaces throughout the site. Do I have to say something specific?
These two findings.
Okay. that the alternative open yard design is necessary to provide flexibility in architectural style. We find that the alternate open yard design is necessary, and it provides flexibility in architectural style and site organization, such as preservation of natural features, enhanced. Do I have to read all that, or just the specific ones? All of them. Enhanced circulation, shared amenities, and/or the protection/creation of scenic views, and approval of the alternate open yard design will meet the purpose of the required open yard as described in this section. So that would be an indefinite continuance back to the full board. I think that's it.
Question for staff before we go on. Earlier you said we needed to assign it a particular date to return in order to continue this process?
So we need an up or down vote in those 60 days. So a project design approval would be an up vote, and so that would be that would end the clock, and this can come back at its leisure to get final approval.
Great. Okay, so okay. So somebody want to second that motion? Okay. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I'm going to vote no, only because I would like the applicant to explore placing some of the units on angles to the property lines. I think the parallel and perpendicular arrangement is acceptable, but I'm not sure it's the best. And I would like to see that exploration happen. Thank you.
I feel the same.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? No? Okay. Well, let's read that motion back real quick. Not all of it.
So we have project design approval, project compatibility analysis met with the findings for alternative open yard, and that the applicant add gables, California gables, to the south elevation of units 1 and 2.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Given the additional discussion, I'd like to know whether this would be Mr. Cunningham, this would be a study or a
I don't think
terminal.
Let's not use the word study.
Well, no, I think it would be a study. I'd like to see a study of a different site plan that departs from the parallel perpendicular arrangement. I'm not saying that that's a condition that the applicant must follow. I simply would appreciate further exploration of the site plan.
So to answer that question, once we give a PDA,
Yes.
that site plan is essentially burned in.
So I'd have to back down to a concept review or a continuance. No, I'll keep my.
Your mic fell off.
Oh. I'll keep my motion as is.
Okay. If there's no more discussion, we should take a vote then. We had a first and a second, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3, all opposed? 4, so motion fails.
Mr. Chair, can I craft another motion?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to approve the project for concept review, and continue it, right? Or
Continuance.
Project design approval?
project design review.
Okay.
2-week continuance.
So was that a project design approval or?
The concept design approval, sorry. Concept design.
Such thing.
There's no such
Okay,
thing
so
as a
it's-
concept design approval.
Either continuance or PDA.
All right, so it's continuance then. For, I guess we don't have to set a date then, do we?
We do.
So do 2 weeks. That works for the applicant.
I'll second that with the addition of direction to the applicant to explore an alternate site layout.
That's when we try to, yeah. So with the concept review, or continuance, sorry, with the motion to include that the, how are we going to do this? That this site layout as proposed is appropriate, as it provides a sense of intimacy and privacy for each respective unit. The architecture is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in materials, quality, detailing, and scale. Most importantly, the massing is also appropriate, as numerous 1- and 2-story units are found in the nearby community. The open yard, what do you call this? Waiver.
The alternative open yard design.
Alternative open yard design is also provable in that it supports the enhanced characteristics of the architecture and provides a unique sense of shared amenities not commonly found in multifamily housing. The scale. However, the board asks that the applicant revise the site layout to provide some flexibility in orientation of buildings. And the applicant can decide the number of buildings and which locations would appropriate that to provide some variation in the appearance from neighboring communities and also within the site.
Again, second.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion?
Chair?
Yes.
For my clarification, this is the architecture has been essentially supported, and now we're asking for the next 2 weeks for them to explore different orientation, if possible, for the site.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
That would be my motion.
Any other discussion?
So I have a question. Do you know what he's suggesting? It's a slight rotation.
I heard some slight rotations. I heard something, and I'm going to do the best that I can. I have looked at that before. I think I can accomplish something, but the challenge that I've had is that when you rotate a building, I mean, we've got special numbers around here, and so this is one of those things. It just kind of happened to fit this way. Some rotation can occur, and it's going to take maybe what you said, Kevin, is some differentiation between the buildings to make it work, because you can't just rotate something without having a conflict with setbacks or space between buildings.
And that's why I want to leave it a little vague, at least to allow you the opportunity to figure out with you guys what number of buildings, how many, but I think given the board that
You
a
rotate
slight,
by the amount of the offset,
yeah.
you actually get a net.
So I'll leave it at
zero.
that.
I would, I'm not speaking for the entire board, but if you end up forcing the issue with regard to certain areas and setbacks, I would be supportive of a modification of the setbacks.
That's
I think that your building that fronts on Punta Gorda Street essentially has to remain as is. I don't think you've got any flexibility there. I'm talking about the other 6.
And
Okay.
given some of the comments of the board members and with the motion staying right now, I think, does that provide some
So
clarity?
It's not a PDA with the condition of doing this. It's a conceptual
Yes.
approval that's continued to the next 2 weeks
Just
to
a
come
con-
back to
just a
study.
continuance.
There's no approval granted
No,
today.
conceptual, just a continuance, a 2-week continuance.
Thank you in that direction.
With positive comments.
So that would be my motion. Comment. And I have a seconder, so I think that's.
Yeah, is there any more discussion? Nope. Okay, so we had a first and a second. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
I don't feel it's necessary.
So motion carries. 4-2.
I'm sorry, could I get the hands again?
Who was it for?
5.
5.
5-2.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate your understanding.
All right, so the other items on this agenda have been postponed. So with that, we will close our meeting. Thank you very much.